we run to time, and then questions after that. I can't see the
just letting Alison in, mate. Sorry.
Hi, Alison. Oh, I can't hear you, but I can see you for now.
All right, just bear with me one sec.
Brilliant. There's a nice picture of Richard stuck in traffic on Cannock Hill.
I think you'll find there's a nice picture of Richard stuck in traffic on Look North on Cannock Hill.
Very true. Nice gap between you and the car in front.
Unlike everybody else, anyway.
All right. Next slide then. So just to recap the objectives, we just have a look. Just a reminder of what we did on the last webinar. So for those of you who joined us last time, we reviewed the course so far for everybody. We looked at OAP, observe, anticipate, plan. We spoke about limit points and showed some videos of those. Richard also demoed some steering technique, and then you heard a little bit about the test from Gemma as well. If anyone wasn't able to get to that one but wants a copy of the slides, we can send the slides out. So just speak to me or ask and we'll send you the slides. So the plan for tonight, the second one, we're just going to again recap some of the principles of advanced driving. At IAM Road Smart, we often talk about trying to create the thinking driver. So trying to make you think when you're behind the wheel. Then we're going to look at cockpit drills, human factors, take a little bit more of a detailed look at IPSCA, the system, and then towards the end, you'll hear from Elliot as well. Elliot was one of our young drivers on the Police and Crime Commissioner courses who passed earlier this year. He was actually the first young driver to pass his test. So Elliot will just tell you a little bit about his experience and just some of the things that he learned and some hints and tips for you guys as well. So if we just recap the principles of advanced driving. I always think this is a really long statement, but so just think about this. So advanced driving is the ability to control the position speed of the vehicle systematically, so using IPSCA, and smoothly using road and traffic conditions to progress unobtrusively with skill and responsibility. So just linking back into what I said about trying to create the thinking driver, that's really what this looks at. So something that's important is sustained concentration, and I think a phrase that Richard first coined was driving consciously. So we're not saying that people drive everywhere unconscious, but being
some drivers on the roads at the minute.
Well, treat everybody with suspicion, but always be switched on to the drive. What percentage of concentration do you need on your drive? Well, you probably don't need 100%, because you do other things like listen to the radio or talking to your passenger as you're going along. So the next one is observation, anticipation, and planning, which we spoke about. Who's here, Richard? Is it?
Izzy.
Brilliant. Okay. Hi, Izzy. So observation, anticipation, and planning, OAP. So again, reflecting back to you as the driver, everything comes back to what you observe, and from that observation, you need to anticipate what you're going to do and then make a plan. So create a driving plan from that. So the next one, and this always raises a smile, is an ability to control emotion when driving. So it's sometimes very difficult to remove emotion, but try and avoid getting frustrated. With someone, let's say, who's pulled out in front of you. That temptation to blast the horn or tailgate them or whatever, okay, it might be there, but what good's it going to do you in the long run? Count to 10 and try and chuck it in the back seat and forget it. So at IAM Road Smart, as advanced drivers, we talk about having an active imagination. So that's thinking about what is going to happen on the road, so what might be around the next bend. So for example, as you're driving along, what reasonably could you expect? A cyclist, horse round the corner, trying to think about what's coming next. But the important thing is not overactive. So, you know, don't imagine there's going to be a parachutist diving down out the sky around the next corner, because it's not practical. So the next one, and something we'll focus on when we talk about IPSCA later, is a smoothness with the controls. So trying to be smooth. Hello. Hi. Hi, Ellie. You've made it.
I've done it. Yes.
Happy days. Brilliant.
Thank you.
You see the screen all right?
Yep.
Yeah, Rich is going to put the presentation back on. You've not missed much. We've only just started.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just letting Kira in as well.
Yep, cool. So smoothness with all controls. So that's acceleration and braking, being smooth and progressive. And as well as being smooth and progressive when you're going on the accelerator and brake, also remembering to do the same when you come off as well. So not just lifting your foot off so the car's jerking around. And smoothness also reflects on steering as well, being nice and controlled and planned. And then that leads into nicely into the last one, which is having a good accuracy of position and speed. And we'll talk more about that with IPSCA later. So on to the cockpit drill, and anyone who's been doing our courses a while would have cockpit drills at the start of drives. So first of all, at the top, we just have a look at what the test is looking for. So the knowledge that's expected on the test. So does the associate understand the concept of IPSCA? Well, we'll talk through IPSCA a little bit more deeply later. Do you have a sound understanding of the highway code and advanced course material? So that's the handbook. Do you have a sound understanding of the technology fitted? And this is also where the examiner is scoring the cockpit drill as well. So cockpit drill sounds like we're in a plane, but the idea is it just gives you a nice familiarization of the vehicle you're driving. In normal terms, it's particularly relevant if you are getting in a new vehicle for the first time. But on your test, when it comes to doing the advanced test, we always encourage people to start with a cockpit drill, and the examiner will be looking for you to do that. It's just a nice set the scene at the start of a test, and it gives the examiner the confidence in your understanding of the vehicle. So just some general tips when you do your cockpit drill. It's always useful, start at the top and look down. So if you're talking through, you know, look at the top of your vehicle, work down from the mirrors, down to the steering column, down to the gears, and it's just a nice logical way of going about it. Again, it's relevant to the car you're driving. So although we're going to talk about structuring cockpit drills in a minute, has to be relevant to the car. It's not just a checklist. Everybody's cockpit drill can be different. I will do it differently to somebody else. And let's say you're doing it at the start of your test. The cockpit drill should be fun as well. We don't want to bore the examiner for 20 minutes before we go out and do our test. So make it relevant, make it fun. Again, you should understand your car's controls and technology. We'll cover that a little bit more in human factors in a bit. And then a factor that really dawned on me actually when Elliot, who's in here, started doing his test was at the end of the cockpit drill, think about what outside factors are going to affect your drive and try and include those as well. And we'll give you an example of that next. So how do we structure it? Let's have a look at some standard structure. So when we're sat in the cockpit, let's say we're with the examiner, you've had a chat about what the test is going to entail, and now you want to do a cockpit drill. So remember, this is your prep to the test. This is your lead in, giving the examiner some confidence. So as your handbrake on, are the doors closed? You want to look to identify the vehicle you're in. Talk about the gearbox. So is it manual? Is it automatic? 5-speed, 6-speed? And you can state that you're familiar with the controls. If you're on a test, it's likely to be the vehicle that you've driven all the time. So you know where all the controls are. You're confident with them. You've driven the vehicle there. You know everything's working. We just spoke about top-down checks. Mirrors and seating position most likely be set to you. You should include a static brake test, which is a pump of the brake pedal. Make sure there's some resistance there. That gives you confidence that the brakes are working. Richard's going to go into some more detail about brake tests in a minute. Switch on the ignition, have a look at the warning lights, make sure they all go off. The only one that should stay on, if everything's all right, is the handbrake warning light. So if you're in a manual car, depress the clutch and press the brake, and then load the steering wheel as you start the engine. So as you start in the engine, if you imagine my hands on the steering wheel, left hand, right hand, just slightly loaded on the steering wheel, pulling down gently as you start the engine, foot on the brake as well. And then what you should feel is the power steering, the steering light as you turn the engine on. So that gives you confidence that's working. Again, checking all the warning lights go out. Finally, with the examiner, you've got your seatbelt on, he's got your seatbelt on. And then finally, thinking about the factors outside that might affect the drive. So think about when are you driving, what is going to impact? Is it rainy? So increase stopping distance, need to increase your follow distance on the drive. There might be lots of puddles around. Are you doing your test at 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon when there might be lots of people out shopping? So there might be lots of people in town and busy areas. Is it at rush hour or peak traffic times on a weekday? So, you're expecting more vehicles to be around. So that concludes your cockpit drill. And then when it's safe, perform a moving brake test, which Richard is going to clarify for you in a minute. So we'll just have a look at a couple of cockpits next. So first of all, does anyone want to comment honestly on this? What do you think to this cockpit? What do you think to this car? Everything all right? Anything that you wouldn't have?
The cable around the gear shift.
Well spotted.
Mobile phone holder in the air vent.
Well spotted.
Something
Anything
on
else?
something reverse mirror. Wrong spot.
Something in the reverse mirror. That's me in my dressing gown taking the picture.
Yes, just so everybody's aware, this is Ashley's car. I comment on the debris just past I call it debris, it's a load of just crap in it, the other side of the gear lever. Yeah.
If anyone wants to look down on the right of my glove box, that's full up of crap as well. Sorry, the right hand side in the door.
That could be your car.
Anyway, so there's a hint as to we included that for fun, I think.
Look at this one now. Look, it looks like something off an Audi advert, doesn't it?
That's like an Audi A8.
The only thing is there is a pair of glasses there that are loose in the cup holders. Anyway, you get the impression. So we're going to move on to talk a bit more about brake checks now. You'll have seen in the cockpit drill that there's a static brake test and reference to a moving brake test as well. So for the static brake check, as we intimated earlier, the engine's off. You're looking to press or pump the brake pedal to feel that pressure, feel that resistance. And as you start the engine, keep the brake pedal pressed so that you can feel the operation of the servo. The servo will almost kick back at you. If you've heard about the 3 phases of braking, this is in effect the first phase of the braking. So you're putting your foot gently onto the brake and you're feeling that pressure. And anybody that's heard Tim Stanley talk before, feel is the first phase, then firm up the brakes, and then the third phase is feather off. So feel, firm and feather is the 3 stages of braking. One way of explaining them. We then go on to the moving brake check. So as Ashley said, we've completed the cockpit drill, we've looked at the conditions outside, and we've started to move. And we're really keen to make sure that the brakes work before we sort of first need them, really, in anger. So we're looking to apply the brakes progressively, light at first, feel, and then firm up to reduce the speed by around about 10 miles an hour. We're not looking to stop. But we're looking to make sure that the vehicle is slowing down as expected. The braking's nice and even. There's not a wobble in the steering wheel, and it's not sort of pulling to one side. There's a good example of what to look for in a moving brake check. And if the situation doesn't allow in a test scenario or when you're out on a drive, apply the brakes as soon as possible after you've set off. And again, just talking through these things either as part of your cockpit drill or as part of your spoken thought is another great way of explaining to the examiner that you know what you're doing. I've just included this video. It's very, very short, but for anybody that hasn't really thought about what happens when you actually apply your foot onto the brake, this is a very short video. I mean, it's a cut through, it's a see-through of a brake disc. Most modern cars have brake discs at least on the front, and if not all round. But you can also see here, this is what we call a six-pot caliper. So there are cylinders inside these, what they call the caliper, and those sort of pistons push against the brake pads that are here, and this is the brake disc that normally turns behind your wheel. So as you press the brake pedal, fluid travels along these pipes from the servo, moves the cylinder, and then the brakes squeeze onto the disc. So the very first thing you'll feel, the video I'm about to play will show, if you watch, the brake pads will move out and grip the brake disc, and that is the action that is slowing down your car. So again, smoothly onto the brakes will maintain a nice balance of the car, but equally just looking to smooth off again. And as I say, just for anybody that's not really thought about it, we just thought that would give you a bit of an idea of what actually happens when you press the brakes. I'm just going to come off presentation mode, because when I go back into it, I need to switch on the sound for the next section. Bear with me a sec.
Arena and David mentioned gear position check. Yeah, certainly if you're a manual, it's sensible to do a gear position check. So you might say something like, this is a 6-speed manual, for reverse is left and down, and gears gears are in the usual position after that. So yeah, no, so you can definitely include that.
Okay, I'm not sure if the sound is going to work on the next video. If anybody has seen the video we recently did using a PlayStation, trying to be a little bit innovative about showing how we can apply IPSCA on a racetrack. What we've done here is use a PlayStation to show what happens if you don't apply smooth progressive braking. But also we've talked about the smoothness of other controls like the steering as well. Ash, can you just nod at me if the sound's working, please, mate? Can you hear sound? No.
Nope.
Okay, so let's watch. When the car accelerates, the weight of the car goes back, and the harsh braking going forward really pushes the car forward. And if we've got unsmooth steering, the balance of the car is really the weight of the car swapping around. So let's go into this corner and look what the unsmooth use of brakes and steering has an effect on the car. Yeah, so I don't know about you, but I'd rather certainly do that on a PlayStation than out on the open road. So let's go down this, I think it's called Park Straight on Cadwell Park. We've now got the balance back of the car. We're into the smooth use, but what we're going to do into this corner is absolutely dive onto the brakes. You watch what happens to the weight of the car. Can you see it leaning forward there? And what happens when the car stops? Bounces back. So that's just a very quick example and a way we've tried to use to show how not to apply the brakes and give you a feel as the effect that it has on the car. I wouldn't recommend you try that out on the road. Okay, so I'm going to hand back over to Ashley now to talk through the human factors. Anybody got any questions before we move on?
No.
Oh good. Stunned silence. Not sure whether that's good or bad. Right, human factors. To me, thinking about earlier I said at IAM we try to create the thinking driver. Human factors is a really, really important element. And your advanced driver course handbook, page 8, goes through this. IAM sees human factors as 4 things. So you as the driver, your understanding of your vehicle, your understanding of the journey you're going to make, and then thinking about the wider world as well. But we'll just start by looking at what the test looks for. So these are 4 criterias from the test form. So has the associated demonstrated a mastery of their emotions? So we're talking about, again, controlling emotions. Are you able to describe and think about the various human factors yourself? And do you maintain concentration throughout the test? Courtesy, is the associate courteous in their approach? Thank people where appropriate, and consider impact on others. Vehicle sympathy and eco driving. So again, thinking about the opportunity to get the car into a higher gear where it's appropriate for vehicle sympathy and fuel efficiency. And then smoothness. So can the associate operate all controls in a smooth and unaccomplished manner? And that links in really nicely with the video that Richard just displayed. So on to the next one. We'll think about you as the driver first. And ultimately, whatever the car does, we're telling it to do. So really, we're the most important factor in the car. And as drivers, we should put safety first in all of our judgments. We should control our emotions. Can sometimes be easier said than done, but we have to try and make that effort. When we're trying to sustain concentration, it is important to manage those distractions. So a big one that the police are talking about this week as people start to go out and drive more again, keeping your mobile phone out of sight, out of reach. Don't be tempted to answer it while you're driving. And always, every day is a learning day. There's always something new. Strive to improve. There's no such thing as the perfect drive. And we always say to everybody, it's important to try and just analyze what you're doing honestly. If something doesn't go well, right, why didn't that go well? What does IPSCA say? How does SIP system say I should have dealt with that? And Richard will come on to a bit more detail about IPSCA in a minute. So about your vehicle, carry out regular powdery checks. Hopefully everybody's seen the video that we produced on powdery checks. And sent out at the start of last month. If you haven't, it's on the YouTube channel. Powdery checks are also in the back of your book near the cockpit drill as well. Making sure you understand the controls of your car is important, and use of the technology that's in it. So, for example, if your car's got cruise control and you're going to use it, be aware that you don't just have to use the brake to turn it off. You can turn it off on the controls on the dashboard as well. And with the vehicle, understanding the performance and balance of the specific vehicles you're driving. So what litre is your car? How does the car perform in each gear? What is the best gear for acceleration? For example, if you're going to join a dual carriageway, you're going to want a nice flexible gear that's going to take you from the slip lane join in 20-30 miles per hour quite comfortably and quickly up to 60-70 miles per hour. Generally flexible gears in cars are third, but they do differ. My other half drives a 1 litre IGO, and you actually find that second gear is the most powerful one for performance and flexibility. So just thinking about your own car, and if specifically if you're getting into a new car, how does this differ from yours? So then thinking about the journey, on to the next one, Richard. So thinking about the purpose, how the purpose of the journey might impact your decision making. So let's give an example of me driving to work. If I know I'm going to an important meeting, making sure I'm concentrating on the drive I'm doing. I'm not focused purely on the meeting that I'm going to. Here's a question we often ask people. how often have you driven somewhere and parked up and thought, which direction did I go to get here? I presume all the traffic lights were green because I can't remember stopping. So this goes back to, concentrating on the drive, leaving yourself plenty of time as well. And then the wider world, we spoke about this earlier, but always expect the unexpected. Thank you, Richard. And again, thinking about factors that might impact your drive. So again, back to me and my meeting. If I'm late for a meeting, I know I have a tendency to rush and cut corners. So again, trying not to think about that and trying to just concentrate on the drive. Observation links is something we spoke about in OAP, in Observe, Anticipate and Plan last time, but it's making good observations and looking out and trying to plan them into your drive. So for example, if you're driving along and you see a load of bins out on the side of the road, well, is it bin day? Where are the bin men? And then finally, your own attitude to risk. So if you're a bit of a risk taker and a car in front of you is driving slowly, but there's nowhere appropriate to overtake, are you likely to try and take a risk and attempt to overtake? So it's just thinking about your own attitudes to risk. So they're the 4 human factors, and we'll move on to system. Any questions in there? No, happy days. You're on mute, mate.
Well, no, I'm waiting for you. I thought you were doing the first section of this.
Did you?
Yeah, no, carry on. That's fine. Okay, so let's go on to IPSCA. So hopefully we all know that it's information, position, speed, gear, and accelerate, and it's the system of car control for IAM Road Smart. So when we're looking at what we need to achieve in a test scenario, so we're keen to demonstrate to the examiner that the associate grasps the phases of the system and they can apply them systematically and correctly to each hazard. Let's not forget, IPSCA is something we use for every single hazard. Plan and hazard management, we're keen to ensure that the examiner knows that the associate can plan and deal with the hazards they've identified. So spoken thought isn't just about naming a list of hazards, it's what do we see, what we're going to do about them, and it's managing that risk associated appropriately. Position, looking at the position of the vehicle primarily for safety, but also you can adjust the position for view. Braking, can the associate use the 3 stages of braking that I mentioned earlier? So again, I use the term feel, so you feel that brake pedal, you feel the pad closing on the disc, then you can firm the brakes and then feather off, and that can just bear those phrases in mind, and I often use the term in spoken thought, gently on the brakes, because if you say it, you generally do it. Gear changing, certainly on a manual car, does the associate select the correct gear? Ashley talked about selecting the correct gear for approaching a dual carriageway or a motorway, and is the clutch control matched with the gear selection on a manual gearbox? We don't get away with it on automatic gearboxes. You may have picked up from both mine and Ashley's cars, we both drive automatics. So even if you drive an automatic, it's demonstrating that the associate understands the various drive modes available. So you may have drive, you may have sport, you may have manual override, and it's great if we can demonstrate those. And does the associate select the correct gear at the correct time within the system of IPSCA? And obviously that's the G, the gear. So let's look at that in a bit more detail. So we're all aware that I stands for information. We gather and process the relevant information. We take information, we use it, and we also give information. The key thing is that we use information to inform the position. We'll talk about that in more detail in a moment. But we position the vehicle appropriately in all traffic situations. We adjust our speed to travel at the appropriate speed in the relevant traffic situation. And a favourite saying of mine is we should always travel at a speed that allows us to stop safely within the distance that we can see to be clear. Once we've got all of that sorted out, when we're dealing with a hazard, only then do we go for the gear. And gears to go, brakes to slow. Loads of these sayings that just helps you remember that only select that gear when we're ready to accelerate away from the hazard. And over on the right here, just a reminder that information passes through each of the whole of the process. Because if you've got some information here and you start to adjust your position and you're adjusting your speed, and then some new information comes along, you start again. So let's use that example a little bit upside down on this graphic, but IPSCA applied to a typical right turn. So we're taking in information as we approach the right turn. We've got one oncoming car, we've got a hazard centre white line, and there's a few bushes, so we can't really see what's on the junction there. But we're checking the mirrors and signal before changing course and maintaining good all-round position, looking for pedestrians. We then think about the position, so you can see the car is moving over towards the centre white line, checking the mirrors, carefully moving the car to that position. We're then checking the mirrors before adjusting speed while signalling and braking progressively. Smooth onto the brakes, get rid of your speed, and you want all of your speed off before here. Once we get to that position and we know that it's clear to go and we've got rid of a speed, then we can select the gear and turn in before accelerating away from the hazard. So let's put that into practice. So I'm a big advocate of using IPSCA within your spoken thought. So anybody that knows this area, this is Doddington Hall car park. And as we would be approaching this information, we could refer to, we've got information that there's a built up area, we've got pedestrians to the left and right, and we've got a cyclist. That informs my position. And I'm positioning towards the centre white line because I want to reduce the risk of one of these parents clipping the sign and dropping into the road or whatever. But with that, those two items inform my position, but it also informs my speed. So as I'm approaching this, I'm off the accelerator, maybe covering the brake because this cyclist may pull out on us. Also informs my gear, 3rd for 30, and we may take 2nd gear if we reduce the speed, and we'll see there's a 30 limit there. And that again, once we've got all of that dealt with, we've got away from the hazard, we've got the gear, we can then gently accelerate as we pass the hazard. Okay, I suspect the sound isn't going to work on this, so I'm going to attempt to do a spoken thought over the top of it instead of you listening to the video. But again, what we've done here is use a games console to demonstrate demonstrate IPSCA within spoken thought. So if we were playing the video on YouTube, we'd be welcoming you to the beautiful Cadwell Park in Lincolnshire. And as we're approaching the main straight here, our eyes are on main beam, and we're already thinking about this information of the bend to the left, position over to the right to increase the view around the corner, reduce the speed, select the gear, then we gently accelerating as we turn into the corner. Positioning over to the left now increases our view around this corner, and what we term balancing the car on the throttle. We're always looking to travel at a speed that allows us to stop safely within the distance we can see to be clear, and the distance is now clear. So we're back on that throttle, and we're mindful that we're approaching a brow of a hill, a limit point. So we're off the throttle, over to the left. Now we've got information, bend to the right. Position over to the left to increase the view, down on the brakes, into gear, off the brakes, turn in. And we're back on to just balancing that car, nice gentle steering, although it's not easy to do on a games console, but always looking for that balance of the car. The important thing there, and it wasn't easy to demonstrate on the console, we're always looking to brake smoothly in a straight line, off the brakes, let the car settle, let the car balance, and only then do we look to take the gear and turn into the corner. And we're looking to separate those things, and we call it removing the brake gear overlap. So now let's look at how we would use IPSCA here. Those of you who are not on mute, feel free to shout out. Those of you are on mute, come off and tell us what information you would use and how it might inform your position and speed.
You've got a road joining to the left of you on the bend, obscured by the lorry in front.
I'll give you 8 out of 10 for that. It looks like a baler to me, but you've probably got a small screen. Yeah,
it is
well
a small
spotted.
screen.
Well spotted. So we've got the right hand bend, and there's a junction off the bend. That's a really key point here. That could be turning into it. It could not. Who's next?
Also, the separators is like close to each other, so you can't.
Hazard line, yeah.
Hazard line.
Yeah, hazard centre white line there. Yeah, well spotted.
Close, yeah.
So more paint, more risk. So long centre white line, small gaps, hazard centre white line. So that's probably warning us of the bend. Anybody else?
40-mile-an-hour sign.
Yeah, spot on. Anybody else?
I've been looking at that driveway on the right.
Yeah, well spotted, Alison. Good. Anything else?
The slow sign.
Yeah,
just
well,
that there is a perceived sort of problem on that road anyway.
yeah, exactly. You generally find where you've got a warning sign, there's generally a slow in the road sign. But yes, well spotted.
And they always say slow in the road, slow for a reason. So,
Or even speed low, observe warning.
Yeah, well,
like
yeah.
it. Like
I like that. Yeah, good. So again, back into spoken thought, information, bend to the right, junction off to the left, 40 miles an hour speed limit, slow sign in the road, hazard centre white line, driveway to the right, and we're in a following position behind what looks like a tractor and a baler. Loads of information. You wouldn't be expected to say all of that, but as you were approaching, you would do that. We probably all know position. We're looking at a following position, at least 2-second rule here, but we're also looking to position over to the left slightly towards the verge to increase the view around the corner. The speed, again, will have reduced that well before here, A for the 40 limit and B then for the following position. And actually, whilst we're in a 40, there might be an opportunity, there might be a national speed limit around the corner. So we're thinking of a flexible gear, and we're thinking about maintaining a view, providing the national speed limit comes along, to be thinking about overtaking the tractor and baler.
And I think Richard makes a good point there. We are advanced drivers, so if you're on your advanced test and there's an opportunity to overtake here, say if that's doing 20 miles per hour, the examiner is going to be interested in you looking for that opportunity. And that might be as much about the opportunity saying, okay, I've looked for an overtake. Actually, it's not appropriate in this situation, so I'm going to sit back. But at least you've explored that.
Yeah, and by approaching on the left, if you imagine you're going round the bend and it wasn't a 40, a right-hand bend is a great opportunity to pick up an overtake on the way out, providing it's safe to do so. Just conscious of time, because I know there's some people need to leave by 10 to 8 for other commitments. So I'll just quickly go through here. I mean, loads of information. Town centre. We've got cars either side. We've got a pedestrian potentially stepping out. We've got a kid on a scooter. We've got another kid on a scooter. We've got an elderly lady down to the right there. But all of that information informs the position of the car. So I would take dead centre, because we're equalising risks between those cars door opening and those to the right. Speed, we're in a 30 limit. We're governed slightly by the car ahead, but a nice following position here, likely to be doing 15 or 20 miles an hour. We're in a flexible gear, probably a 20 second gear, but remember third for 30. And clearly we're not going to do any acceleration, but as we travel along the road, there's going to be new information, so we go back into IPSCA as we go along there. Any questions on IPSCA before we hand over to Elliot? No, good.
Nice
Okay, so absolutely delighted to introduce Elliot to you. As Ashley mentioned earlier, Elliot was one of our first Police and Crime Commissioner sponsored under 25 drivers. Personally, sorry for saying this, Elliot, I was bloody delighted that Elliot was the first one, because look at the spoiler on the back of his car. What a great example of somebody who is really proud of his car, but is taking responsibility for the way he drives. I hope you've seen the video that we've released recently. There's the footage of Elliot driving, and there's some great comments from the Police and Crime Commissioner. So if you haven't seen that, please go and look at at the YouTube channel of IAM Lincolnshire, sorry. We have to get Elliot to re-record the video 5 times because he kept saying IAM Lincolnshire, didn't you, Elliot? Anyway, Elliot, it'd be great if you could just talk through a few moments your experience of the course and how you found the test, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. The course itself was, I admit, like I said when we was recording the video, I thought I was actually a decent driver when I was, you know, coming into it, but it made me realise how many like little opportunities that I had to better myself, and I noticed it in my daily driving as well as my work driving, because I do drive quite a lot for my work. I'm a mechanic, so I'm always test driving the cars. So as much as it was a good time to practice and hone the skills, I found a lot more new skills to practice, if that made sense.
Makes total sense. How did you find the course, Elliot, with your associate and what have you? Sorry, the observer and what have you?
Yeah, no, Ashley was really good. Down to
Cheers, mate.
Checks in the post.
yeah. No, it was a really good course, to be fair. It was nice because obviously you could select your own times and it's flexible. You don't have to do it at a set time every week, which creates problems. So everything's flexible, which is really nice. And it wasn't. It was nice to be able to pick up on like my individual strengths and weaknesses rather than not just work systematically through the book by the book. It was nice for Ashley to have a little bit of independence and have him have the confidence to say, right, I tell you what, we're going to practice this today instead. It's quite nice to be able to do that.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, Elliot, actually, because certainly most of our observers certainly aim to tailor the course to suit the individual needs. It's really important. And back to the test then. So what was it like on test day?
I thought it was going to be a lot worse than what it was. To be fair, like I thought it was going to be as bad as the driving test, like your first one, but it wasn't bad at all. You get there and you know, everything's fairly relaxed and you make a bit of conversation. I think, to be fair, I was waiting around for about 5 or 10 minutes on the day, which was it was actually quite nice. I say it like it was a bad thing. It was actually quite nice. But yeah, once you get in the car, it's not like you don't have to act like a robot on your cockpit drills or your spoken thought. That's not what they want. They want you to be friendly, approachable. They want you to have a little bit of humour, relax when you're doing it. Because if you're not relaxed, then you're not going to be a thinking driver. You're just going to be a panic driver.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always say to everybody, it is only driving at the end of the day. And as much as you're trying to drive as well as you can, you know, for anyone who's going for test, you've driven there, you drive every day, so you know you're more than capable of driving. And Elliot's right. You know, the test is a good experience. I think Richard uses the phrase demonstration drive rather than test, and I think that's a nice way to phrase it.
Yeah.
Nice one. Thank you, Elliot.
Yeah, brilliant, Elliot. Thank you so much. And I must say, having had the pleasure of being in Elliot's passenger seat, not as his observer, but when we were filming the video, his car's bloody quick, and boy, it makes a noise. But he knows how to control it, and he's a bloody good driver. So well done, Elliot. Really pleased for you, mate. And thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming along tonight, mate. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries.
Right, so just want to recap on tonight and just leave you with some things to think about practicing whilst you're in the car, but also if you can't get in your car as often at the moment, some of the theory things you can practice too.
Get your games consoles out.
Yeah, to be fair, I should get my PS4 out, shouldn't I? So start with a cockpit drill. It's always nice to keep that fresh in your memory. We've given you some of the structure tonight, and we'll share these slides at the end of this. Remember some of the things we've spoken about. So IPSCA, tug, take, use, give, and OAP. And these things really link into you as the driver. Try and focus on these as you drive. Richard's spoken about being able to stop in the distance you can see is clear. That should be the most important factor of driving. With spoken thoughts, when people first start doing spoken thought, you know, people sometimes don't like it. You're worried about sounding stupid. Practice spoken thought out loud when you're driving, or even in your head as you're driving along. Try and build the phrases that work for you up as you're driving.
And joking aside, a couple of associates ago, I remember a lady I had to practice. She used to do spoken thought in her head as she walked down the street. Now that could be quite appropriate at the moment if you're planning on keeping a 2-meter distance from people. So, think about what information you're using as you walk down the street to inform your position and speed as you're walking around people down the street.
And then I spoke about this one earlier as well. Be honest when you self-analyze. If you make a mistake, be honest about it. But one thing I would say when you're driving, don't dwell on your mistakes. Don't let the mistake ruin the rest of your drive. A phrase I like: chuck it in the back seat, chuck it over your shoulder, and forget about it. And that's the same on test as well. The examiner is not going to be expecting a perfect drive. Just that you're thinking about things all round. At the moment, you've got your handbooks there. Regularly review your handbook. At the start of each competency section in the handbook, there's the competency checklists. We spoke about these last time on the webinar. They're really, really useful just as a check of where do you need to go? Where are you going on the course? Are you meeting the minimum competencies? And of course, it's been a while since you've had any observers feedback. But just keep recapping over your run sheets and trying to apply what your observer has spoken to you about when you're driving. And then finally, keep in touch. We always say we're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Come and give us a follow. There's so many decent videos we've got on our YouTube channel at the moment as well, which will help you develop. So go and have a look at those. And finally, thanks very much for coming. Any questions?
No, I don't have any at the moment. No, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. We will do another one of these. I think we're planning a slightly different format. We're probably going to do something about driving as lockdown restrictions ease, and just giving people some hints and tips. What they can expect of getting back on the road, which hopefully will be useful for everybody.
And most probably do it for all members as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
As opposed to just live associates. So everybody will be welcome. I see there's a comment. Have I show conversation?
Yeah, just some chats. Thank you very much for the feedback, everybody. So that's it. Thank you for coming. Stay safe and drive well, and take care. And we'll see you all soon.
Yeah, we'll do.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
love that other people like Elliot Spoiler as well. That's ace. Yeah, thank you all. Really appreciate your time. Hope you've enjoyed it.
If anyone does want to stay on to ask anything individually, me and Richard will be on at the end. So wait here.